Okay, we are on YouTube, just giving it on here Instagram as well. So, okay. Oops. Okay. Sure, this is working. I'm wanting to start putting these on Instagram and YouTube so that if you have people who are not on Instagram, I've had requests of like, how can I share this with them? So there will be a YouTube video as well. I'm going to start developing just that as a place to put these. So if you're watching the YouTube or the Instagram and I'm not looking you in the eye, I'm like looking down at the other person, you know, that's a little bit why this setup is there. Hopefully I can find a way to get the cameras closer together so that they're about at the same space. But today we're going to call this good enough. So thanks for your patience. This is such an important conversation I'm really excited to have with you because it's one that I feel like a lot of women are beginning to notice and recognize this difference about how church doesn't feel like it is necessarily supporting them in the ways that they need to. And a lot of other members are struggling to really understand why or how that's the case. So hopefully energetics and what we're going to be talking about today is going to create a new way of looking at the scenario and helping us understand these different dynamics that are at play. Before we dive in, there's a couple of disclaimers that I always want to put out there. The first one is not speaking for the church. These are not doctrine. This is just my perspectives of taking some energetic principles and applying them to what I see showing up in culture, in scripture, in practice. My beliefs evolve and grow and change, as will the things that we talk about and I share here. I encourage you to formulate your own things. And as always, church officials speak and represent the church, right? So that's the first one. Second one is energetically. When I'm talking about masculine and feminine energies, sometimes that can be a little bit confusing because am I talking about men and women? Are we not? We all have masculine and feminine energies, right? How does this relate? Which one are we describing? And I try to be as clear as I can because there are certain times where I am specifically talking more to men and women, but there are also times where what I'm talking about applies more generally, right? And it's just when I'm using the term masculine and feminine energy, I am more referring to two specific types of traits and different patterns that the masculine moves through and that the feminine moves through, and men and women could be in either one of those. Right? Understanding the individual makeup and breakdown of our own masculine and feminine energy is a very multifaceted layer process. It's one that I do in my programs and trainings, and I'm actually working on a quiz you can take that will show you your personal breakdown, because there are a lot of things that go into that, right? So for the sake of this conversation, we're going to be discussing it in terms of men and women because that's the most common place that I see this, and because there is a significant point and purpose to that energetically. Gender does play an important role in energetics. It has to do with your biology, your biological makeup, and your energetic makeup, and the relationship between them, and how we come together as men and women to co-create not just babies, but actually creating new energies in the world. Right? So there's a reason that we're going to be focusing on that. We probably won't dive into it in this video. That's more of an advanced concept. I just wanted to kind of seed that idea there for you. There is a reason that this is important. So with all that out of the way, let's dive in. I like to describe this process recognizing that there are 4 different steps for both the masculine and the feminine in maturing and fully developing their own spiritual power, right? And this process starts in different places for masculine and for the feminine, but they end up in the same place. Right? So it's really important to understand that there's a difference between masculine power, there's a difference between feminine power. Both learn how to embody those and have them balanced in their own being, right? There is also a difference, though, between the pathway to spirituality for the feminine and the pathway to spirituality for the masculine. And understanding those differences is really, really important to understand where we commonly have these like rubbing up against each other, right? Having struggles with one another. Okay. So the way I like to describe it is thinking about it as a flame and a container. These are the 2 pieces of this process. Okay? And the masculine, what we're going to start out with on top, begins as just a flame. There is no container, no awareness of the container. Right? I call this stage the unchecked masculine. Right? It's just a blazing and a burning. Right? We see this commonly. It even shows up in like psychological and sociological studies and research of men having this sense of just like presence and my words matter and I'm going to contribute and I want to do what I want to do and I don't care what anyone else says, right? That is sort of the essence of the flame. And it is the first starting place for the masculine in this journey of learning to get, see, we get to the same place, is this, I like to call it like a beacon or a lantern, where you have this powerful flame that is able to shine bright, right? Think of like a lighthouse, right? You need a powerful source of light, but then you also need a container with which to magnify it and contain it so that it doesn't burn the whole place down, right? And so that it can spread and illuminate and use that light for a purpose that is greater than itself, right? Unchecked masculine, not aware of the container, often not really particularly concerned with the container, right? May not even recognize the value of receive the container. Meanwhile, the feminine is largely just an empty container with just some like smoldering embers that haven't really gained a flame yet. Okay? Now, she'll notice she does go on a similar journey in that this flame eventually is awoken and rises and grows and then is contained, just like the masculine is. But let's look at kind of this process here of the masculine in relationship to church, and specifically what we teach and the way we use masculine language to describe this like becoming more spiritual, right? Because a lot of the language talks about sacrificing yourself or like the need to not think about yourself so much, to serve and to be focused on others and how you're going forward, right? That is in essence taking this flame and moving it into the second stage where we're starting to contain against it, right? And it's this, you have to learn that suffering is a part of the process and it's good and it's for your good and it's going to help you, because in this second stage, the container is introduced and the masculine is resisting it. See how it's trying to break out of it? It's inflamed. It's like, oh, I don't like this. I don't want this. This is uncomfortable, right? And so that idea of speaking to the masculine and saying, this is good for you. This is for your benefit. We want to allow this. And eventually that leads to this place where the masculine becomes sort of humbled and is more reserved and submissive and is like, fine, okay, I'm not going to try breaking out of this. I'm here. I'll see what this container is all about and try and learn what I'm supposed to from that place. And from there, that power slowly begins to come back, but it is now in a disciplined act of, I understand, I see, I'm moving through this, right? So a lot of even the service that especially, so we're going to switch now for a second to talking about men and women, because this process is a masculine one and there's 4 different layers that we grow through. And that first one is moving from survival mode into a stability mode. So we all actually kind of go through this first process in that journey. It's learning us to get out of this like, what's going on, and finding that, oh, okay, I'm feeling secure and stable as I'm moving forward, right? So that's what I mean of like, there are layers to this analogy and how we can use it and apply it. And so there is this purpose. This is where the idea of like maturing in your faith process happens, that we all first go through this process, and then later this process is often introduced. This is what describes like a faith crisis. Okay? So we have like, I'm doing well, I'm in my container, like things are going right, I feel all right, like this is just how life is, so moving forward. And then something happens to cause that container to shatter, right? So, we like to use my shelf broke, or something triggered externally in your life. You had somebody die, you had a child who was navigating a struggle, you had some sort of health challenge, right? There's all sorts of things that can represent the shattering that takes place. But through that shattering, it actually introduces more oxygen that allows this flame to like start to awaken and become more aware. And this is where we begin to recognize, oh, I have my own personal power. It is not just what I'm given inside this container. I hold that. I can become this. And from there, that tends to grow, and we expand in it, and we step into it, and we become in this risen state where it's like, oh, this is so amazing. I want everyone to feel and experience what this journey is and how wonderful it is, and what I have discovered, and how my perspective is different in viewing the world, right? And this is often the place where we get one of our friction points, because those who are in this stage often conflict with those who are in these earlier stages, right? And there is this perception that somebody who has gone on this journey has actually gone backwards, and they're here, right? And you're doing things wrong. So this is why the common advice for those who are up in this experience is, you need to allow the suffering. This is good. You need to keep doing these important things, right? Because they're in essence trying to get you to contain that flame again. Meanwhile, you're over here going, no, I broke free of this container. I don't want to be contained again. That's not the point. And we often feel that tension, and it's like we're being told, you have to go back to this experience. And once you have been here, there is no going back to this. It is not in your experience anymore, unless you decide to make it so. And when you decide to do that, it becomes very uncomfortable, very difficult, because you, in essence, have to shrink yourself back to try and fit in this container. And that's that experience a lot of women describe, of like feeling like they're shrinking themselves in order to fit in or be viewed as acceptable or not. Very few women in particular, and us in just humanity in general, understand what this looks like, having followed this process and pattern here. Oftentimes we view this third stage, I call it almost the like false arrival, the illusion. It's the appearance that we have arrived, that this is the end goal. I was not in touch with my power. I now am alive and fully in this power. I had all of this sense of self and was so focused on me, and I'm now serving and caring and concerned about the well-being of others, right? That becomes often this viewpoint of arriving. But energetically, this is actually a really dangerous thing to do, because it can lead to a type of energetic enmeshment, where we get into a relationship where one person is fully doing the masculine and the other is fully taking on the feminine. And that creates this sort of energetic codependence or enmeshment. It's not healthy or balanced for either individual. They're not fully in this place where their own masculine, which, if we're looking at just one perspective, right? Again, masculine and feminine only makes sense in energy if you know what context you are using it in. What is the comparative relationship that you're making here, right? So in just looking at this top row, the masculine part is that fire, it's that feisty bit. And the container is that feminine recognizing I'm here, or actually, I have that backwards. The feminine is like that chaos, that fire, that it's like fire and water are often very feminine elements because they are fluid, they are not predictable, they're all over the place, right? And the masculine is that structure, it is that container, is creating that safety. It's able to hold the raw power of the feminine and not smolder it, right? And the feminine is balanced enough too to not try and break the container, right? To get too hot, you heat the glass that it shatters, right? We want to find that good balance between them. Okay? So anyways, slight tangent there, but the point being, this is the end goal. We don't want to get caught up in thinking that this is the end goal. And oftentimes we misunderstand this journey that happens between the two of them, right? So we just talked about it in terms of a faith crisis, that this is usually like the orthodox perspective of viewing the gospel and growing in our spirituality. And when we are in this experience, this is often the more like nuanced perspective of viewing, I have my own personal power and I'm seeking to balance this out. Right? There is a role and a point and a purpose for both of them. Right? Now, that was not the intended conversation that I was planning to have in this video, but I think it was an important one. The one I was going to have was what we'll go into now, which is understanding that the way we run the actual organization of the church helps men specifically in their pattern of growth here, and women do not get that same support here in their pattern of growth. Okay. So we're switching now. We're no longer where before we were saying like both men and women can be in this experience, both men and women can be in that experience. If you're orthodox and then more nuanced, right? In this faith maturing process, right? That was the past conversation and connotation of how we're using this construct. Okay? We're going to shift it now and say, this is how men grow in their spirituality. This is how women grow in their spirituality. It's very different, right? And when we look at the structure and organization of the church, we get a couple of things that come and play out, right? Men are up here viewing this stage and they go, oh, look, women are so much more spiritual than men, right? Because they're recognizing this stage here in women already. And so they're like, look, you're already so spiritual. You're so amazing. You're so whatever, right? And so women are like, okay, all right, sure, I guess. Or, or maybe they're sitting here looking at the masculine in this stage and being like, yeah, I am. This is ridiculous, right? Don't you see how reckless or like all this damage or hurt that can be caused when we are too focused on the self, right? And we're not aware of the implications of how that can affect those around us, right? Meanwhile, the masculine organization is set up to say, okay, you need to learn to take your flame and contain it and restrain it and learn to discipline it, right? Well, the feminine is already here and you tell her to restrain it, you're like wiping away the little essence she feels of herself and who she is, right? That becomes very damaging to a lot of women. And that's a lot of the pain and hurt that is described by women. It's this feeling of like, I have no place, I have no purpose, I'm not seen, I'm not recognized, I'm told just like shrink, 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 shrink for the benefit of others. And here's where another part of this process steps in is part of the feminine developmental process spiritually is the necessity of the breaking of the container. This does not happen in the masculine pathway. So the masculine does not understand it. It thinks something has gone wrong when this container breaks. And so the closer the feminine starts to move forward in this natural feeling and pull that she has, this is the moment where it's like, you're the black sheep, you're falling away, you're losing yourself, you're becoming deceived, right? A lot of that language shows up in this place because this idea of getting rid of the container is so foreign. It's not comprehensible how that fits in to the spiritual pathway or process. And it is simply viewed as you're doing something really wrong, because that container is important. And if you're breaking it, that's going to cause a lot of problems for you. You're not going to be able to arrive at this place, right? And what then happens is a lot of women reach this point afterwards and they go, oh my gosh, you were so wrong. Breaking this container was the best thing that ever happened to me. You should all like break this container. It is what made me feel more spiritual, more connected to God, more connected to myself than ever before. And the masculine, meanwhile, sees the feminine here and only recognizes a similarity to it here in these two places. And it usually assumes the feminine is in this place, that it's rebelling against the container, because again, there's no comprehension of this container shattering. It doesn't really make sense. And so they're hearing that the feminine is saying, I was in one place and now I'm in another place. And the masculine naturally assumes, oh, you were here and now you're here. Well, let me help you move here. To which the feminine is like, I am not going back to that. That is not part of my experience. That is not what I want. That is not what is necessary for me. Right. And so we get a lot of this conflict where the masculine, again, is perceiving the feminine as reckless, as rebelling, as needing to be tamed, as needing to be put in its place. Right. And trying to get the feminine here. And the feminine is resisting going there so much. And the sad thing, I don't know if sad is the right word, but the common thing that often happens that keeps women actually stuck in this phase and feeling like they're not quite sure how to move forward, or feeling like they're stuck and they can't progress, is they do actually have to return into a container in order to reach this final fourth stage. But because they're hearing from the masculine this language about the container, they only know about their experience in a container from here. There's not a lot of language or experience or examples of being in this state. And so the feminine often has a lot of trauma around the container and resists making this final step into the embodied space. Okay? I'm just realizing as I'm talking, I don't know that YouTube is seeing any of this at all. So I apologize to anyone who is watching on YouTube and you can't see the images I've been pointing to. I was trying out something new, trying to start streaming more to YouTube and to Instagram. So if you're wanting to share these with somebody who is not on Instagram, you can go to my YouTube channel and access them there. There we go. So, there's a little bit of lag between the streaming here on Instagram and on YouTube. So I can see that now this is finally showing up. So if you're on YouTube, find somebody who has Instagram and come look at the video in this context, right? But anyways, finishing up for those of you who are on Instagram, this is a big part of the struggle we have right now. And this is why I am so passionate about helping women understand what this fourth step is. Because we know sort of what it looks like in the masculine experience, but sometimes that gets shadowed too. When the feminine has all this distrust, it's hard to believe that any masculine is really in this space, right? We tend to feel a lot safer with masculine that is in this space because it naturally balances out with being in this risen space. And again, there's that fear of the container and not really recognizing this and remembering this past experience and being afraid of this experience, right? Depending upon the degree to which you personally experienced trauma from perceived masculine, right? There's a lot of misunderstanding and not knowing what this actually looks like, right? But more so than that, specifically the feminine version, we don't comprehend this well, neither the masculine nor the feminine. And that's why it's, to me, the like linchpin or key piece in all of us moving forward is we have to understand this. Because when you understand this, the context of the feminine spiritual journey begins to make more sense. And the masculine can see, oh, you did arrive here. I must have been wrong when I thought you were in these spaces and you were here and that you needed to go there. And it starts creating the wheels turning and opening up more space for the masculine to naturally want to understand what is this process. And because he can recognize this state in the feminine as the same end goal he has for himself, that respect starts to show up. And I talk about this more when I talk about what masculine language and authority and stuff looks like, because it's very different than feminine. If you basically, show you're the top dog, the masculine will bow to that basically. And so when the feminine gets to this place, the masculine recognizes, oh, you are at least on par with me, if not ahead of me. And the fact that there's this whole experience that I don't know or understand, I need to make sure I take some time to understand this. But the feminine often is trying to engage with the masculine and get the masculine to understand her experience and her needs from this space or this space or this space, right? And the masculine can't comprehend well this experience here. And the feminine is usually doing that for the purpose of feeling validated and safe and capable to progress and move forward into this final embodied state. The thing is, you can't have that validation come from outside. It has to be the ultimate decision of the feminine to move into this place, which again is another reason why we get this energetic enmeshment or entanglement or codependency that starts to show up, because the feminine is wanting to stay in this place and she will flare up even more as an attempt to protect herself, right? Especially the more the masculine tries to put the container on her, trying to get her to go into this space, assuming that she's in this space, right? Not recognizing that is the exact opposite of teaching her about this space, right? Which is why we need, this is what I call a spiritual mother. She has embodied this place. She knows the fullness of her power. She knows how to hold it. She knows how to wield all of her feminine capability and has the ability to radiate and share that and teach that to other women so that they can understand this same process and pattern. Right? So important. And it's a big part of the misunderstanding that is causing so much unnecessary hurt and pain, in my perspective. Because if we understood these two processes, you understand these different stages, how to identify which one you are in, how to move through it, why we sometimes move forward and come back, right? It's not always a set, I'm here, then I'm here, then I'm here. It's not always linear, right? It is more of an oscillation as we move through this process, right? But how do you make it so that your set point is anchored in here, so that you're spending the majority of your time in this experience and only occasionally dipping into something lower? You're staying more and more in this place, right? And what tends to happen is women just get stuck here and oscillating a little bit, trying to, and just building up all of that momentum just gets stuck here, right? And in fact, sometimes that's what causes the feminine to shatter, is she's been kind of pushing against the walls, which again, the masculine is like, oh, I know you want to push against the walls. You want to rail against them. You don't like this container. It's good for you. It's okay. You should stay here. Just keep doing the things. Go to the temple, read your scriptures, do other things. That's going to restrain you and move you forward in your progression, when that's not what's supposed to happen for the feminine. She is supposed to break that container and move forward out of it. And so when she does those things, it's pushing up against it, but there's no place for all that momentum that is building until it eventually, the flame inside here is so hot, it will shatter that glass and she enters the next stage. So it's a beautiful thing. This, no matter what, we're going to progress, we're going to move forward. But the way in which that occurs, the level of trauma that we experience throughout that process, that's what's different, right? There are healthier ways to move through this than others. And when you understand these different steps, it becomes easier to move through them and to understand how to navigate them. That's what I love teaching you all about. So I'd love to hear in the comments your thoughts about this. What do you think about the analogy? How does it help you? Does it resonate with your own experiences? What other parallels and patterns do you see show up in it? If you want to learn more about how to move through this process, how to become that spiritual mother who has embodied the full essence of this And little disclaimer, if you haven't watched my stuff on mothers, we are not just talking about motherhood in like the traditional sense we do in the church of like, you're so wonderful for the children you bear or for helping other children. There are so many ways you can have an impact on a child's life, right? Motherhood is not about just your relationship and connection with children, your responsibility, your caretaking, your nurturing of them. It is so much more than that. In fact, I've done a couple of posts recently, reel, that are talking about motherhood in that it is our ability to birth, to create something new, to bring that new life, light, and love into the world, that to be this portal between the spiritual and the physical. That is the true essence of what it means to be a mother. And therein lies the inherent authority that we have. We have authority over birth. It is given to us. It is part of our role and responsibility of bringing things into this physical experience. And instead of trying to take what already exists and fix it and change it and make things better, that's not actually calling upon our physical abilities, our divine nature, our spiritual power, or our authority as mothers. We're not supposed to just change the world. We are supposed to birth it anew. And that is part of the whole essence of feminine power. It is part of the point of reaching this spiritual mother's place. And is what this whole Instagram account is wanting to focus on, is helping you learn how to become that spiritual mother so that then you can radiate that light and love and birth new relationships, birth new experiences, birth new ways of being, new opportunities, new possibilities, right? That is the essence of a feminine. Right? And when we learn how to get into the space and we can partner with a masculine who's in that space, oh, the potential, oh, what is able to be created, oh, the joy, oh, the abundance, oh, the wholeness, like that is the ultimate essence and goal for all of us. That's what we're working towards, right? So understanding this process, learning that is such a fundamental part of our role specifically as women. And it's what I love teaching you all about. I have a couple spots open to work with me privately, and we're starting my next group program in January. So if you are interested, I have a bunch of holiday discounts going on right now. Like it's the best time to get involved in either capacity. But regardless, I hope this gives you a little bit of peace and clarity and validation for the experiences that you're having on either side, right? If you're up here in the masculine experience and you know people who are going through this, like to recognize, oh, I see, I understand what's going on for them. We're just in different patterns and different processes. That's okay. They're both taking us to that same end goal if we're willing to allow it, if we're willing to honor the journey of each other and trust in that where we're feeling pulled next is part of our pattern together, right? Because when we look at this from a systems perspective, this pattern plays out in, where's my other visual? My kids take it. Right? Looks like they did. I have what I've created that I call the staircase model. And it basically is a visual representation of this relationship between the masculine and feminine and how they ebb and flow together. So if you imagine this is like two different strings that are intertwined with each other, the masculine goes through his process throughout all of this. And the feminine goes through hers as well. Okay. Not the best artist doing this quickly, right? But the idea I want to say is this becomes really important in a system level perspective, because unlike in an individual perspective or in like a relationship perspective of like two partners, right? we have to have somebody in the masculine experience and somebody in the feminine experience in order to create the momentum that actually propels us forward to new levels of change. So sometimes we get caught up in this feeling, especially the feminine when she's here in this risen energy state. There's this idea of like, I need to get everyone into this experience. And if everyone could just make the journey and be here, it would all be good. Energetically, that's really unhealthy though, because if we're all in the same state, it's like a blob and nobody actually has that differential that creates the momentum to continue our growth and evolution and expansion. And so the importance of allowing those who are in the masculine to have their masculine experience and to honor it and allow it, and those who are in the feminine to have their experience, to allow it and to honor it, is so important because it creates that dynamic here. Right? But what I feel like is approaching is we're becoming more and more aware that women specifically are ready to have this experience honored for them and cultivated, and beginning to change the language and the lessons and the things that we're talking about so that women know this is what it looks like for you to go on your spiritual journey. Right? I was thinking about in church today, in the lesson, somebody brought up how the Aaronic priesthood is preparatory to receiving the Melchizedek priesthood. And I was like, here we go. Aaronic priesthood is here, and it is preparatory to receiving the Melchizedek priesthood moving forward. Highest form of priesthood comes through our endowments and our sealings. Specifically, we need that, again, masculine and feminine unity, partnership, whole nother conversation we could have on that, right? But it made me think about how the faith crisis is like the preparatory piece to your experience of being in the risen energy experience for the feminine. How we don't talk about this so much, right? We always, like, this whole part of the picture is kind of cut out for women. And if we're talking about women just specifically, it's always in terms of the container, right? And it's like, oh, this is what your relationship looks like in terms of when you are together, right? With your spouse or with there. And until then, follow this path. It will get you here. And then you guys can have this sort of relationship. And it doesn't take into consideration what this looks like. And a big part of this involves especially a woman's connection to her body. Again, she is that portal between the spiritual and the physical. She has that connection, and her body is an integral part of that. It is why, for women especially, if you want to take away a woman's power, you mess up her relationship with her body, with her birth, with her birth is a whole nother thing we could talk about energetically. We'll probably do a video. I talked a little bit about it yesterday, comparing birth to a faith crisis. If you didn't see yesterday's live, go check that one out. But it's, in essence, that's where we have so many issues, is we don't understand the role of a woman's body. We don't understand women's sexuality in the difference of how it is from men's. And I'm not even talking about like what arouses her or what gets her in the mood and how it's different from men, or like none of that, right? We're talking from an energetic or spiritual perspective. What is the purpose of it? What is the drive there energetically, right? It's this whole other way of being. And that's really what the feminine is just like. I would like this to be just even acknowledged that it exists, and quit trying to say, hey, it's not here, just come and do this, right? That is why so many women are unhealthy, are struggling, because there's so many things in our general societies that are trying to take women and say, be like a man, right? Follow this pathway, do this pattern. It's what gets you where you need to go, right? And it's, in essence, reversing the natural polarity of her whole wiring. I want you to imagine like current in the wall in the United States versus current in other countries, right? And if you're going to travel somewhere else, like to Europe, you need adapters that can adjust the flow of the current so it doesn't burn out your electronics and short circuit them, right? Well, women are basically wired for this different type of current, and yet they're being told to show up in this world that's a whole nother one. And in essence, when she plugs that in, maybe she has a decent adapter, but that adapter is cutting away from her natural power and connection, or she doesn't and is getting plugged in and she's getting fried, right? And everyone else is like, what's wrong with you? I just plug my stuff in all the time. Why do you feel like you need some extra thing there? You think you're so special or whatnot? It's like, no, they're literally wired differently. And we have to recognize the importance of that. And it's why they say one of the most courageous things you can do today is to be a woman and to say, I'm embracing the fullness of my femininity, to seek to be a spiritual mother, to say, I am different. And I'm not going to pretend any longer that I'm not. I'm going to seek after my needs. I'm going to seek after those things that are most supportive to me. There's a point and a purpose for that. And trying to say you need to either be like a man or it doesn't really matter. We're all both. Neither one of those are helpful, right? That's another thing we have kind of going on in our world is we're trying to navigate and understand the differences between these masculine and feminine and to recognize we don't have to be stuck in like these traditional roles, right? This is sort of that early on perspective of like the man goes out and hunts and the woman stays home and takes care of things, right? That's here. We're moving forward and recognizing, oh, there's so much more potential that both have and what they're capable of, right? And that we want to get to this place where there is this equal balance between the two, but we can't do that by just simply erasing the lines between it and saying, oh, it's all the same. That again creates this blob effect. We lose our power. We lose our ability to create momentum and to move forward. And that causes a lot of problems here from an energetic perspective. Now, again, disclaimer at the beginning, in case you didn't hear it, there are lots of layers to our masculine and feminine energy, and you have to understand the relationship and the context in which you're talking about masculine and feminine and comparing them. So there's a lot of layers to understanding this. That's why I teach a whole program to help you understand it. But I want to introduce some of these concepts and ideas to you so that you can start seeing the things that we are struggling with in our world, the places we are having the highest degree of conflict, the places that are causing the most harm and struggle and overwhelm in our lives come because of a fundamental lack of our understanding in the difference between masculine and feminine and the patterns that they follow and how they're meant to interact with one another. When you understand those three things, you can take just about anything that you are struggling in with your life and understand why those problems are showing up, what needs to shift to be able to change them, and how you can move forward with more harmony, joy, abundance, light, life. Like it's like getting a, oh, what do we always call it? I wish parenting came with a handbook, right? It's like getting a handbook for life. It's like, here you go. Here's the way it was set up, right? The same way we developed throughout science and physics and understanding like, oh, I know if I take this marker and I set it down on my desk, it's going to stay there. It's not going to like float away. I know that from experience, but science tells me it's because of gravity, right? That's what energetics does. It says, hey, you know how you're worried, like, is this going to float away? I don't know that I should let go. I may not be able to get it back because I had an experience one time with no gravity. And I didn't know I was in an environment that was different from what I was used to. And all of a sudden, all my stuff was floating all over the place. And I'm trying to like grab it and hold on to it. And I don't know what's happening. And I don't know when it's ever going to go back to normal, right? When you understand those physical or those energetic spiritual laws of how things are set up, you can be like, oh, yeah, I'm on Earth. Gravity is going to be this much. Yeah, I want to go to Mars. I got to make some adjustments for how the gravity is going to be there. Oh, when I'm in space, I'm not going to have gravity. So I really need to make some adjustments for that. I need to understand how I'm wired. How's this lack of gravity going to affect and change things, right? Same sort of idea with understanding these energetic or spiritual laws. What phase am I in? Which energy state am I, or energy path am I in? Am I in the masculine? Am I in the feminine? Which stage is that am I in? It's going to let you know what you need to do to help you have the most comfortable and successful and enjoyable journey there. Right? And the better we get at understanding those things, the better our experience becomes, the more enjoyable it is, and the better life becomes. Right? So hopefully this helps. And hopefully it gives you some new ways to start thinking about things and talking about things. We're going to be discussing it more here, especially throughout the coming weeks. I'm going to be working on a guide to help you be able to reference some of this and use the language and start sharing it to recognize this is what's going on. It's another great thing about the program is you learn language to articulate what you are experiencing, because energetics is intangible, right? It's easy to be like, oh, I'm struggling with this physical thing, and here's what the gospel or the church teaches me to help me deal with this physical problem I'm having in my life and how to navigate it. But when it's an intangible thing that is occurring to you, it's a lot harder to know, what do I do to heal this, right? And it's why, and again, one of those traits I love about being a spiritual mother is you are, in essence, gaining the ability to become an intangible healer, right? To provide the same way a doctor can put an arm that has a broken bone in a cast so that it can allow it to heal. You can recognize, oh, I have an intangible broken arm here, and here's what the cast looks like, and how can I move forward in that healing, right? That's what understanding these patterns and principles allows. And because it's intangible, most of us just want to blame something externally as the reason for what we are experiencing, or to suggest that there's not some sort of internal thing taking place, or maybe we're aware of it, but we're just passing it off as like, oh, that's life or stress or lack of sleep or whatever, not realizing there's actually something you can do about it, right? You don't have to just be like, oh, well, that's what happens in life. You break your arm and you hope it heals. And, somebody came along and learned, it heals better if you set the bone, and it heals even better if you can make it immovable for a long period of time. And you need, this amount of time for this type of bone, and this one heals faster. And right, as we gain that understanding, our ability to effectively treat and heal and prevent, right? Preventative care, right? We're moving more and more into that realm in our physical health world. Would you rather be investing in fixing your health after it deteriorates, or investing in your health to prevent it from falling into that state, right? Same thing as we begin to understand these spiritual principles at play, how they work, how to navigate them. And to me, I find it really, really fun to take those energetic principles and apply them to gospel principles and see the parallels between them. Because to me, there are so many parallels. It plays so beautifully. In fact, show you a really fun one here, real quick. Then we'll wrap it up, which is, if you are to take this as, here is a natural state everyone is given into. And everything on this side of the line is, in what degree have you grown and expanded since your natural state? Okay? We have these 3 different levels, we could call them, that you can potentially achieve. And in fact, there is actually a 4th version of this combined state. The first version is where we are fully balanced in our own masculine and feminine power, and we can start creating and deciding and doing things on our own for our own. When we reach this final 5th state, this is what I call the divine. Now, if you ever hear like divine masculine and divine feminine used in energetic contexts, other places in the internet, they're talking about this state here. Most of them don't recognize or categorize this 5th one. But to me, there's a very big difference, especially if you get into manifesting. You have the power and ability to utilize your own desires and creative powers to manifest or create things in your own experience. But when you learn instead to align your desires, or I don't even like to use that language because the connotation that we have with it is not at all what I'm trying to intend with, because we tend to, especially as women, denote that back to this, right? Oh, I have to align my desires with God's desires. I have to like shrink myself and play small. That's not at all what this is. If you watched my stories earlier, I talked about the experience with my reels and how I was struggling with wanting to do them, but feeling like God was directing me, that was the thing that I needed to be doing. And we had this like back and forth experience that played out. That is more what this experience is about, is it's, I have this desire, God has this desire, and we have this back and forth co-creative experience of how it's coming about. This is where we get co-creative with the divine. This is where we recognize we are divine and we can create. And there's a slight nuance difference to them. And the power, though, if this is 1,000 times more powerful than this is like 1,000,000 more than this. It just becomes this like exponential curve in our growth potential for us. So if you're here hanging at one of these levels and you're like, this is so amazing, just imagine what potential is in store for how much more utterly incredible and amazing your life can become. It's pretty awesome. But the point I was going to say is it's fun to see these parallels between energetic principles and gospel principles, right? So here you are, it's a natural man. How far are you going to grow and progress in your life? Terrestrial, telestial, terrestrial, celestial, highest degree of the celestial, right? There are these patterns that show up over and over and over again, right? Rather than viewing it as a specific place that you have achieved, right? It is how much have you become in your development and in your progression, right? And there are different markers that can help you identify where you are in that process and different tools to aid you in that becoming and furthering that growth. But in essence, that's one beautiful way to describe it, is looking at how far have you come in embodying the divinity of who you are, the makeup again of the masculine and feminine within each one of us. And again, that beautiful remembrance of our Heavenly Father and our Heavenly Mother and our Savior Jesus Christ, who paved the way and made it possible for us to call upon His power from them to come into our own, right? That is another part of this beautiful process. So anyways, a fun little extra piece we just tagged on there at the end. If you're just joining us later, go back to the beginning. We went through lots of cool ways to use this flame and container, the beacon construct, to look at a lot of the challenges that show up in a faith crisis, in faith journeys, in the relationship between Orthodox and nuanced members, and most especially in that relationship between how are we supporting women and men in their spiritual journeys, because they're different. And what we need to be able to move through that process is different for each one of us. And the more we understand that, the more we recognize it, the easier it's going to become. Again, key piece here is we need women in this embodied state. Right? And now, like both of these, right? Because the more we have there, the more that creates a way for the masculine to see and understand what has not been understood. Because I keep saying this is going to be the last thing, but we keep having people hop on, we keep having good conversations. So I'm just going to roll with it and trust this is where we need to go. Right. Part of the thing for the masculine, though, is they're going through this journey. They go through this journey often without recognizing that the container is even there. Okay. So it's very much this like, just, oh, similar. I'm just doing this process here. I'm just moving through this thing. It's how my personal power is just growing, not even aware of the nature of the container. And that's what is so hard. How do you describe something to someone that can only be understood through experience? You have to have the experience of the container to recognize it, to know what it is, to become familiar with it. And the masculine can just kind of go through their journey without ever really being aware of it, but that is why he needs the feminine, and why the feminine's journey is set up differently, because she starts her journey with an utter awareness of the container. She is very viscerally aware of it. It is part of the process, and she only becomes more and more aware of it with every progressive part of her path, right? And that is what allows her to help create this balance, to show the masculine, hey, we weren't just a flame going through this journey. There was another piece here to play. And this is what that piece is. Okay? And the best way to make the masculine aware of the container is to arrive this embodied and divine stage where he can see it. It shows up in you. Okay? And that is the experience that all of us are craving all along this journey. Anytime we're struggling, we're in that place, it's because we just long for this, right? The feminine is often just long to be seen, right? See the fullness of me, see the potential, see the value of that, right? And for the masculine is allow me to be able to do something, to have this greatest purpose here, right? To have meaning to this flame that I have, right? And not understanding that meaning doesn't come from the flame. It comes from the container with the flame. Right? Anyways, fun little construct here. I've enjoyed playing with this one a lot. It's been very useful in our coaching. A lot of cool parallels that we can draw with it throughout things. And I hope you have enjoyed this video. Again, if you want to learn more about this, obviously hang around here on Instagram or go check out my Instagram if you're watching this on YouTube, at Emily Carolyn Baker or at spiritual.mothers. Emily Carolyn Baker is my non-LDS version of a lot of this content, where sister or spiritual mothers is my place to apply more of that LDS perspective and lens, and specifically focus on helping women understand this process, understand this journey to become a spiritual mother. I work with clients privately. I also have a group program starting up in January. If you want details on either of those, now is the time to do it. Send me a DM, comment below, because I've got holiday discounts that are going on. They're going to be ending soon. I'd love to have you join us. So hope you have a wonderful rest of Sunday. And let me know, what was your favorite part about this construct? Any light bulb moments you had? I'd love to hear about them. Okay. All right, YouTube. You always have a little bit of a lag. And so when I finished on Instagram, I got to come over here and finish up with you. I apologize again for the struggle with the image. Hopefully, though, the conversation we had at the end is useful for you and gave a little bit more context of what I was talking about earlier. Again, come say hi over on Instagram for the full video. And next time, I'll make sure the camera is positioned right to be able to see what I'm drawing.